the audio insert. And then you get the closed caption of the script.
Yep. Everything that top half does sort of gets tossed to the audience and everyone else to make sure it's all put together properly.
Yeah. And the closed captioner now with US broadcast standards and practices, everything must be closed captioned. So that's also an alternate of working in the industry. There's a lot of places that hire for that. And that's just if you have a good ear, sometimes you get the script, it just depends. And then there is the edited broadcast version. And then there's the DVD uncut version, which I'm always afraid that people, like parents, are going to buy the wrong version for the kids. Because that would be bad.
And of these on the screen, the ones in red are basically the ones that the JVTA sort of focuses on. This is the stuff where we can sort of teach you what's going on about what's happening in the industry and find your place. And of course, the obvious one, and the first one in all of this, is the translation itself. So let's go and talk about translation. And before I hand it off to Ayano, who's going to talk about the translation, I realized that when Ayano and I first met each other, we first started talking, I realized that we shared a certain similar sensibility about what it meant to work on localizing. Localizing is taking anything from one country and making it available in another country in a different language. So when you take an anime that's Japanese and you have to localize it into English for an American audience, what is your goal? What are you aiming for? And the best description I've heard of this actually comes from the Russian composer Tchaikovsky. Strangely enough, Tchaikovsky said something very interesting. He said that the goal of the artist is to inspire in the audience the same feeling that the artist intended when he or she conceived of the original work of art. So when artists create something and they have this idea it's going to feel a certain way, and if the audience reacts that way, they go, yes, they got it. So the challenge is when we're localizing or when we're translating is we want to make sure that an American audience has the same emotional journey, gets the same feeling as the Japanese audience would from watching the Japanese version. Now, of course, that's an ideal to strive for. Sometimes that is more or less difficult because of all the cultural differences. But that's the goal that we're shooting for when we're doing this. Whether you're doing the subtitles or we're doing the dubs. We're both trying to get to the same feeling as the original work of art. So right now, I want to hand it over to Ayano, who is the general manager at JVTA. Oops, I went too far. I'm fine. Where is it? Get back to me. There we go. I want to pass it over to Ayano, and she'll talk about specifically translating and the challenges of subtitling the show. Ayano, it's all yours.
I've been working for a translation business. Well, I've been working for a translation business in Japan for 5 years almost, and mainly in Japan, of course, I used to take care of English to Japanese translation. And since I'm Japanese, I prefer translating English to Japanese, but we take care of Japanese English translation too, which usually animation, or sometimes short films, but usually as animation. We worked on Tokyo's over there.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is if you're going from Japanese to English, then you want someone who understands American culture but speaks Japanese. If you're going from English to Japanese, you want the reverse. You want someone who understands Japanese culture but speaks English.
Yeah, and it's pretty hard. And Japanese is not like Spanish, everybody can speak. So you have to understand both culture, and then you have to kind of adapt it and translate the culture. So that's the hardest part of translation. And you may think translating anime is pretty easy, and sometimes it's kind of easy, but actually not. It takes time, and then you have to think about it. And so let's look at one example. This is the anime called Ice, and actually released in Japan last year. And we did subtitles for that, and this.
Yeah, one of the things I know a lot of fans say is like, oh, they need to keep it closer to the Japanese. We want a literal translation. No, you don't. No, you do not want a literal translation, because what we're going to do now is we're going to play you the video of the scene with a literal translation and see if you get the same feeling that the Japanese audience would get.
Okay, here you go.
Hitomi, 先に行って待っててくれ。愛したりするからこういうことに。さすがの腕前だな、演出長。若くせめて安らかに。
Yeah, it doesn't work, right?
I understand. We can address that question later. That's something Jessica was talking about, the differences between broadcast standards and practices. But many times, I have noticed that fans want it so literal that unless you understand Japanese, you're not going to be able to follow what's going on.
And then maybe some people may speak Japanese, I don't know, but the structure itself is totally different. You know, we put verb at the end, and that's common. So if you follow the order, it doesn't make any sense. And yeah, so you have to kind of adapt it and then make it more natural and smooth. And so yeah, of course adapt it, but it has to be grammatically correct at least. So it has to be at least like this.
これで最後の瞳、先に行って待っててくれ、ジュリア。人を愛したりするからこういうことに。さすがの腕前だな、演出長。かっこいい。せめて安らかな眠りを。
Notice no one laughed this time. Very different emotional experience.
Yep, so even though the scene is very tense and very serious, if translation is pretty bad, it's actually turning off, right? So you have to have at least a decent translation for, you know, those like Naruto and like stuff.
And one of the things that Ayano explained to me is this idea that they are also adapting. I mean, I always have thought, we're adapting for the dub script, but the subtitles, they're pretty straightforward and literal. No, they actually have to make sure that they're adapting clearly so that it's still understandable in English, even in the subtitles.
So we follow guidelines. And actually there's a lot of guidelines, but this is basic one. Each different studio like use different rules, but this is a sort of like kind of basic one. And then we only use 2 lines each subtitle, because if you use more than 2, the half the screen is going to be like letters and letters, and the subtitle is going to cover every character, so we don't do that. And then also, like, we only use 40 letters in each line. It's more like technical reason that if you put more than that, it's going to be on the screen, so you can't really read it. And also, it takes a few seconds for audience to read one line. So even though the character talks a lot and then fast, and then you want to put all the information in there, if you do that, audience cannot keep up with it. So you kind of summarize it and then make it more like smooth so the audience can. It has to be easy to read. Otherwise, you can't really enjoy the footage. So you have to worry about a lot of stuff. You can just translate it and then put it on the screen and let it go. You can't do that. You have to think about to make sure the audience can keep up with it. And there's a lot of like, we basically use the same punctuation as like normal English writing, but like we italicize and filter voice, such as like voice over the phone, like and TV and radio. And also singing lyrics and stuff, and monologue too.
Yeah, this was something interesting that I took for granted. There's certain little codes that they use for subtitles that you don't really think about, but you have to if you're actually working for a company and putting them together. One of them is italics.
Yeah, similar ones are closed caption.